What's up, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Brewing with 50 Bucks. This is the show where we take your favorite commanders, we slap on a $50 budget, and we make a deck that is not only functional, but is able to help you win the game. My name is Seth, and I'm coming to you from the General Warfare headquarters. I'm glad you can join us today. So, I'm just coming back from my trip to Chicago. Absolutely phenomenal city, and I absolutely loved it. Felt so much like Gotham City, and got a chance to go to Forbidden Door. As you can tell, I'm now a new member of Bullet Club. But for today, we're actually going to take a look at a fan-submitted request for a Brewing with 50 Bucks episode. First of its kind on the channel, but if you have any suggestions for any future deck brews, just pin them in the comments down below. I'll be sure to read them and be sure to do a brew on them at some point in the future. Now, for today's brew, we're going to be taking a look at one of the new commanders, another commander I should say, from Battle from Baldur's Gate. This one is Wilson, Refined Grizzly. And with this, we're also going to pair Wilson with the background Raised by Giants. So basically, Wilson itself is a very fun little commander with a lot of keywords attached to him, but only 30 decks were created for him on EDH Rec. Really? He's such a fun little grizzly bear. Why not? And he's keyword soup, basically. But with that, half the reason I wanted to build this version was, one, my initial idea got kind of stolen. Thank you. But the other reason was I wanted to try a little bit of a challenge. Mono-green, no dipping into any other colors, just straightforward mono-green EDH with a $50 cap on it. So join me in our mono-green excursion as we look at Wilson and we go through the deck strategy together. So, Wilson Refined Grizzly is a 2/2 for 1 and a green legendary bear warrior with the abilities that this spell can't be countered, has Vigilance, Reach, and Trample, and Ward 2, which means that if you want to target this creature, you have to pay an extra 2 mana. And it also has the ability, which is unique to Baldur's Gate, to choose a background. And our background for this one is Raised by Giants. It's a 6 mana enchantment, legendary enchantment, 5 and a green, where commander creatures you own have base power and toughness 10/10 and are giants in addition to their other types. So with this build, basically a few people want to go bear tribal, but I think Wilson would benefit more in going into a Voltron strategy. So in this case, our main strategy for this deck is basically play Wilson, mod him up with auras and equipments, and go in for the kill. And as always, we build these decks with a budget of $50, which includes the price of the commander, which excludes the price of the basic lands, and we also offer a $5 overage compromise. So with the compromise itself, the decks can be built for $50, but the compromise is available for those who can spare that extra $5. The deck list will be in the show notes down below, but if I can ask of one small favor from you guys, if you like this kind of stuff, just consider liking this video, sharing it amongst your play group, subscribing to the channel, and hit that bell icon to be notified of every single video that comes out of the channel. Thank you so much. We're going to be going over the standard array of categories in this deck. So we're going to be going through our lands, our artifacts, our planeswalkers, our enchantments, our creatures, our sorceries, and our instants. And we always like to start off with the most cumbersome of categories. In this case, it's actually going to be our instants in this one. So, as you know, there's a lot of instant speed interaction in green that can definitely help Wilson and can now actually help you to protect him. So we're going to start off with one of the most popular green cards in the format, Beast Within. Say it with me if you know it already. For 3 mana, it's instant speed, destroy target permanent, its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. Blossoming Defenses is next, where this one allows you to give Wilson +2/+2 and hexproof until end of turn. This doesn't negate the ward ability. This just gives permanent protection from any kill spells or any removal of Wilson in any state, because it'll give him hexproof. Fog is next. There's only 2 fog effects, I should say, in this deck, as I needed some filler in this deck, but feel free to modify your deck list in any way, shape, or form. In this case, if you're about to get pummeled to death, or if somebody's going to go in for a game-ending swing for victory, you could just fog and prevent all that combat damage that would be dealt to you this turn. Hunter's Insight is next, where whenever Wilson attacks and you're attacking for big, you can just choose him. When he deals combat damage, you can draw some extra cards off it. And if you have Raised by Giants on the field as well, you're going to be drawing up to 10 cards with Hunter's Insight. Inspiring Call is next. Basically, with this, we're using it for the second ability where creatures will get indestructible until end of turn. Just be sure to suit up Wilson with a +1/+1 counter beforehand so you can get that extra card draw and you can give him indestructible. Colony Ambush is next, where with this, our main way of removal in green is going to be through fighting. So with this, on its first side, you can fight a creature, another creature an opponent controls, but on it, because it's a dual face or dual modal flip card, the second side is Colony Territory, where you can just play it as an extra green source. Crosting Grip is next. Instant speed removal with split second, which means it doesn't hit the stack, where you can destroy a target artifact or enchantment. Master's Rebuke is next, where this is another fight effect, but in this case, you can do it to creatures or planeswalkers you don't control. So you're going to be hitting some extra things with Wilson if you don't like them on your opponent's side of the field. Mortal's Resolve is next, where this gives our big bear some indestructible and +1/+1 until end of turn. Basically, it'll negate any board wipe your opponents are trying to play, and basically Wilson will still stay on the field and can still attack. Nature's Claim is next. Destroy target artifact or enchantment for 1 green mana, and its controller can gain that extra 4 life. Obscuring Haze is next. With this, it's another one of our fog effects, but you can actually pay it for free if you have Wilson on the field, and you just prevent all the combat damage that will be dealt to you this turn by creatures your opponents control. Primal Bellows is next, and since we're doing mono green, this will come in handy, since Primal Bellows will give +1/+1 until end of turn for each forest you control. So with this, we're running arguably enough forests to make this lethal for one of our opponents. Prize Fighter is next, and this is another fight ability, but in this case, you fight a creature and you also get a treasure token out of it. Ram Through is next, basically another fight effect, but if the creature has trample, which Wilson does, any excess damage is dealt to that creature's controller instead too, so you can get 2 for 1 somebody. You basically kill one of their creatures and you do some extra damage to your opponents. Return of the Wild Speaker is next, another staple green card where you can draw cards equal to the greatest power of non-human creatures you control. Last I checked, Wilson is a bear and not a human, so you can draw at the very base 2, and at the very most, God knows how many. Probably your entire deck. Return to Nature is next. This is very, very useful. It's also another destroy artifact or enchantment, but it also has the ability to exile a card from a graveyard, which will pretty much stop any graveyard-based deck from popping off. Snakesin Veil is next, another one that gives hexproof, but in this case, it will also give a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So you can suit up Wilson with that +1/+1 counter, and if you have Inspiring Call, you will also be able to give Wilson some indestructible on top of it. Tamiyo's Safekeeping is next, another one that gives hexproof, but this also for 1 mana gives hexproof and indestructible until an end of turn, and you also gain some life off it. You gain 2 life off it, so pretty much protects Wilson from any effect that'll just target him or just outright destroy him. Wilt is next. For 2 mana, destroy target artifact or enchantment, and it has cycling too, where you can pitch it away and draw an extra card instead. With Sand Death is next, it gives Wilson indestructible until end of turn for 1 green mana, and it's just cheap enough to cast. And the last one of our instance is You Happen on a Glade. So with this, you either get to choose one. You can either search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them, and then put them in your hand, and then shuffle, or you can return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So if you're lacking some mana, you can search for some lands, or if there was a piece you wanted and it's in the graveyard, you could just return this. You can just regrowth this basically. Our next category is going to be our artifacts. And with this, the first part of our winning strategy, where we're going to be suiting up our bear and we're going to be swinging in for big. The first one is Basilisk Collar. Our equipped Wilson will have Death Touch and Lifelink, which will make him extra scary, where we're going to be getting all the life off Wilson, and for any creature that decides to block, they'll die, because that's what Death Touch does. Belt of Giant Strength is next. This is also another card that gives our creature base power 10/10, but the equip cost is 10 and the ability costs X less, where X is the power of the creature it targets. So you could pay this actually for 8 instead, and basically Wilson will have base power and toughness 10/10. Blackblade Reforge is next. This is just prime for our deck, as they'll still get +1/+1 for each land you control, and equip legendary creature for 3 mana instead of having to pay the extra 4 to equip. It's super good, and it's usually one of the scariest cards on the field when it comes into play. Fire Shrieker is next. Equipped Wilson will have Double Strike, and its equip cost is 2, so giving Wilson Double Strike with the base power 10/10 is almost game winning and killing one of your opponents right off the bat. Hero's Blade is next. I like this card as it'll give +3/+2, and whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield, the Hero's Blade will attach to it, or you may attach to it. So whenever you're playing Wilson, ideally you're playing Hero's Blade first, but whenever Wilson comes into play and Hero's Blade is already on the field, it'll equip already to Wilson, and it'll give that +3/+2 for him. Horned Helm is next. This will give a +1/+1 and has trample. Kind of counterintuitive as Wilson already has trample, but you have the green ability to attach the horn to a target creature you control at any point in time. We are running some creatures in this deck, and basically at instant speed we can just equip this and attach this to any one of them. Luxodon Warhammer is next, giving +3/+0, trample, and lifelink. This is another ability that will give us a little bit of a power boost and some lifelink on top of it so we can gain some of that extra life back. Prowler's Helm is next, where this quick creature can't be blocked except by walls. And basically, not too many people I know, especially in my play group, play a wall deck. This will come perfect for Wilson as no creature will be able to block it. Saddle of the Cavalier is next, +3/+3, can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or less. And the fact that Wilson has trample, this will just go right over, and this will just give an insane boost to Wilson. And with the equip cost being 3, pretty straightforward and pretty simple as we're going to be wrapping pretty much. And we're going to be having so many equipments, so many auras already on him. Scepter of Celebration is next, giving equip Wilson +2/+0 and trample, counterintuitive. But the funny thing is, whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you create that many 1/1 green and white citizen creature tokens, with equip cost being 3. So you can swing in with Wilson, and if he's big enough, you can create a multitude of little citizens to just keep up the defenses. Soul Ring is next, and obviously included in one of these decks as we have the budget for it, but 1 mana to play it and tap it and add 2 colorless to your mana pool. And the last of our artifacts is Wolf Rider Saddle. With this, when it enters the battlefield, you create a 2/2 green wolf creature token that attaches the Wolf Rider Saddle to it, but equipped creature gets +1/+1 and can't be blocked by more than 1 creature, with an equip cost of 3. So automatically you're going to be getting a wolf off it, so you're going to get a little bit more defense, but you can just equip this to Wilson, and it can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. And amazing enough, considering Wilson has trample, and if the base power is 10/10 off him, basically you're just going to be going in for a big ol' swing and a big ol' damage going to your opponents. The next of our categories is going to be our enchantments. Most of this is just going to be auras to suit up our big bear, but for the fact that we have a bunch of them, and Green does have some good auras, we are going to be getting a lot of value off this. Starting our list off with Alpha Authority. Enchanted creature has hexproof and can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. We saw this ability already with Wolf Rider Saddle, the second part of it, and giving hexproof to Wilson is just going to be valuable in the long run. Ancestral Max is next. This is an obvious include to any enchantment deck, but in this case, basically +2/+2 for each other enchantment on the battlefield. So this includes our opponent's enchantments as well. So Wilson will get an extra +2/+2 for each one of our enchantments, each one of our auras as well, and he's going to be a big old beast bear. Blanchwood Armor is next. Enchanted Wilson will get +1/+1 for each forest you control. We're running a number of ways to fetch some extra lands on the field, so having the extra +1/+1 for each forest is going to be very, very good, very vital, and it's going to be very scary for our opponents. Boar Umbra is next. Equipped creature gets +3/+3, but the most important part of this is Totem Armor. Because Totem Armor is whenever an equipped creature would just be destroyed, just remove the Boar Umbra and prevent all damage instead. So basically, this gives second wind to Wilson. Canopy Cover is next. Basically, equipped creature can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach, and equipped creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. Pseudo pretty much hexproof from an older format. I believe this is Zendikar. Our equipped Wilson can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach. So you suit him up with a bunch of ways to protect him from being blocked, and Wilson's just going to run through your opponents like it's nobody's business. Colossal Majesty is next. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. It's not going to be very hard for us to get Wilson up to base power 4, so we're going to be getting that extra card drop on each of our upkeeps. Indomitable Might is next, where this aura has flash, and Enchanted Wilson gets +3/+3, and the controller may have it assigned its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. With Wilson, you can just assign the full damage going at your opponents as though it wasn't even blocked. So it kind of messes up your opponent's strategy to actually block any of the damage going towards them. Kenra's Transformation is next. Now, this is a card that we're not actually going to be putting on Wilson. This is basically one of the enchanted creatures. We put this on, lose all abilities, and just turn him into a green elk with base power and toughness 3/3. So Obviously speaking, we're going to want to put this on the scariest creature that is not named Wilson Refined Grizzly on the battlefield, and so that we can just run right through them. Master Chef is next. This is another background we're adding in the deck, but this is going to be in the 98 in this case, where commander creatures you control have this creature enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it, and other creatures you control enter the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on them. More specifically, the first part giving Wilson an extra +1/+1 counter on him, so that'll obviously trigger the Colossal Majesty if you also have that on the field. The last of our enchantments is Seal of Primordium. Basically an early game enchantment that you can just sacrifice to destroy a target artifact or enchantment. The next category we're going to be going into is our sorceries. We're running about 9 sorceries in this deck, so we're not going to be doing too much on our own turn, but most of it is going to be pretty beneficial for us. As our first one is going to be Cultivate. Say it with me if you know this one already. Search your library for up to 2 basic lands, reveal those cards, and put one on the battlefield tapped and the other one into your hand, then shuffle your library. The next card is Azuri's Predation. I am so happy this card is now budget, because for 8 mana, now bear in mind we are playing green, 8 mana, for each creature your opponents control, you create a 4/4 green Phyrexian Beast creature token, and each of those tokens fights a different one of those creatures. For each one of your opponent's creatures, you're gonna get some extra tank on the field, and you could just completely mess up your opponents. If they have smaller creatures, if they're just going wide with their creatures, you can completely mess them up. And you can get some extra beasts on the field to protect yourself as well. Harmonize is next, where for 4 mana you're drawing some extra cards. Never a bad strategy. Hunter's Prowess is next. Until end of turn, target creature gets +3/+3, gains trample, and when this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw that many cards. So this is basically like a mixture of a couple of our cards we saw just before, which includes Hunter's Insight. This is a strong card that whenever Wilson is going to be dealing that damage, you're going to be drawing that many cards. Just be sure you have enough cards to draw so that you don't deck yourself out. Kodama's Reach is next. It's a carbon copy of Cultivate, where you search your library for up to 2 basic lands, reveal those cards, put one onto the battlefield, tapped, and the other into your hand, and then shuffle your library. Rampant Growth is next. For 1 less mana, you just search your library for 1 basic land card, put that card on the battlefield, tapped, and then shuffle. Regrowth is next, where you get to return a card from your graveyard to your hand. Any card in your graveyard, you just return it. Rishkar's Expertise is next. As I mentioned in my last video, I am so glad this is also very budget, as you can draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control, aka Wilson. And you can cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. Easy, because most of our cards are less than 5 mana. Our mana curve curves out pretty much at 3. So any one of the cards that we're going to be drawing, we could just play easily. The last of our sorceries is going to be Soul's Majesty, where you could draw cards equal to the power of target creature you control. Easy enough. Basically, it's a Rishkar's Expertise without the secondary ability. We're coming down to our last 3 categories. We're going to start our third to last one off with our creatures. We're running 7 creatures in this deck. Basically, this deck relies on Wilson being on the field, so these are just add-ons, some additional creatures to add some flavor to the deck, if you would. We're going to start off with a Nara Wolvet Familiar. So as long as it's your turn, commander you control have Indestructible, and it also has the partner mechanic, but since we're not using this as the commander, the partner mechanic doesn't really matter. So for this, as long as it's your turn, Wilson becomes indestructible. Doesn't mean your opponents can't get rid of a Nara, doesn't mean they can't interact with them on their turns or before their turn or anything like that, but this is just good to protect Wilson and give him a little bit of indestructibility and a little bit of extra protection. Next up is Emerald Dragon. You've seen this in my last video. If you haven't seen it already, go check that one out. But basically this is a mini Stifle, where it just counter target activated or triggered ability from a non-creature source. So simple enough, and then it turns into a 4/4 flying trample dragon for 6 mana. Galta Primal Hunger is next, and I wanted to add Galta in this deck as a backup for Wilson, and despite the fact that Wilson will already be super big, Galta will just come on the field almost immediately once you slam down Belt of Giant Strength or Raised by Giants. Guardian Augmenter is next. It has Flash, which, as you know, I absolutely love. Commander creatures you control get +2/+2, and commanders you control have Hexproof. Always love to see Hexproof on Wilson, as basically your opponents won't be able to interact with him. Thunderfoot Baloth is next, and this has Trample and Lieutenant. So Lieutenant reads, as long as you control your commander, the Thunderfoot Baloth gets +2/+2, and other creatures you control get +2/+2 and have Trample. Trample is not exactly necessary with Wilson, as Wilson already has Trample, not to sound like a complete broken record, but that extra boost of +2/+2 could be the deciding factor on whether or not you kill your opponents and win the game. Ulvenwald Tracker is next, and this is one of my favorite cards in this deck, as this is the Bear Fighter. And what's more flavorful than having a bear as your commander that you could fight your opponents with, or your opponent's creatures with, I should say. For 2 mana and tap the Ulvenwald Tracker, you could just basically have Wilson fight any one of your opponent's creatures and just destroy them. The last of our creatures is Yeva, Nature's Herald. With this, you could flash them in, and you can cast green creature spells, though they had flash. So you can flash in Wilson at any point in time when he's been destroyed, and you could just flash him in and just go ham on your turn. Our penultimate category is going to be our Planeswalkers. We're only running 3 of them, but these 3 I feel are significant in our deck. And we're going to start off with Garruk, Primal Hunter. 5 mana for 3 loyalty, a legendary Planeswalker. His +1 is create a 3/3 green beast creature token. His -3 is draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. And his -6 is create a 6/6 green worm creature token for each land you control. So most of the time when you're using Garruk, you're going to be using his -3 ability to kill him off. But it's never a bad idea to create some beasts as well for some extra protection. Next is Vivian of the Arkbow. A 5 loyalty Planeswalker for 6 mana, that for his +2, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature. The -3 is target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. And the -9, the ultimate ability, is creatures you control get +4/+4 and gain trample until end of turn. Again, doesn't really affect Wilson, but basically giving 2 +1/+1 counters on Wilson and the fight ability on Vivian makes it so much better than having to use your extra resources or tap some extra mana for that Ulvenwald Tracker. The last is another Vivian, the Champion of the Wilds. And basically you can cast creature spells as though they had flash, the +1 being until the end of your next turn. Up to 1 target creature gains vigilance and reach. So Wilson already has both of them, but to put some extra counters on there. And the -2 is look at the top 3 cards of your library, exile 1 of them face down, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. For as long as it remains exiled, you may look at that card and you may cast it if it's a creature spell. Ultimately speaking, we're going to be using this for the flash ability to flash out Wilson. The last of our categories, and the one we always like to end off with, is our land base, the fuel to our engine, and the way we're going to be able to cast our spells. So we're going to start off with Mossword Bridge. This is the only hideaway land we're running this deck, where you hide away 4, basically when it enters the battlefield. Mossword Bridge will enter tapped, but you can look at the top 4 cards and then exile 1 underneath the Mossword Bridge and put the rest underneath your library. You can add a green mana, but for 1 green mana and tap it, you can play the exile card without paying the mana costs if creatures you control have total power 10 or greater. So our background and our commander will easily fill the requirements for this. You can basically just hide away a card underneath the land and then play it at any points you play Raised by Giants. Rogue's Passage is next. As always, this is a card that allows us to get through defenses and just swing in for the kill, where for 4 mana and tap it, target creature can't be blocked by this turn. Tyrite Sanctum is next. This one will allow Wilson to become permanently indestructible and permanently turn him into a god. The 2 at a tap, target legendary creature becomes a god in addition to its other types, and you could put a +1/+1 counter on Wilson. And then for 4 mana, tap it and sacrifice the Tyrite Sanctum, put an indestructible counter on target god. So easily enough, you could do this at instant speed as well, as long as you have 4 mana and the Tyrite Sanctum up. War Room is next, allows you to get some extra cards into your hand, as well, although you have to pay 3 mana, tap it, and pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity. So on, you pay 1 life to draw on a card. And lastly, we're going to be running 32 forests. And that's how you build a beautiful little Bjorn who can bust your head in at no expense. With our deck total of $50, which includes the price of our commander and excludes the price of our basic lands, we come up to today's total of $46.88, which is, in fact, under budget. And as I mentioned in previous videos, the $5 overage compromise is there to add a little bit of extra spice to the deck, but in this case, we don't actually need it, as we are very much under budget. by about $3.12. So there is some wiggle room that if you want to add some fun cards that are like $3 in there, or just switch out some other stuff in there. But for the purposes of this deck, we're sticking at that $46.88 mark, and we are going to accept the under budget brew for this deck. So with that, we're gonna get into our pros, our cons, and our out of budget recommendations. We're gonna start off with our pros in this case, and our most obvious pro is that this is a very quick deck to interact. And playtesting, I was able to get Wilson out easily by turn 2, and then start swinging for big around turn 3, turn 4. Even so, like having Hero's Blade and other smaller equipments and auras is super beneficial in this deck, and especially so with Wilson and with it being mono green and you being able to ramp super hard. It's not going to be hard for you to catch up to your opponents or even supersede them, and you're going to be also ahead of the game as this is just a Voltron deck, and the fact that this is super quick, this is super specific with what it wants to do, you're going to be in the driver's seat, especially with opponents who need a little bit of time to build. Instant speed interaction in this deck is no problem. As you can tell, we're running about 21 instants in this deck, and we have other ways to do instant speed stuff, like the Tyrite Sanctum, we can do it instant speed, War Room, and others, like even the Seal of Primordium, we can do it instant speed. But with that, we have a lot of instant speed interaction, and we have a lot of ways to protect our bear in the event that somebody's trying to get at him. And you can even keep casting Wilson after his board wipe. He's a 2-cost commander, so even if he dies once, you can pay him for 4, and you can keep paying him as long as you have the mana for it. But for the fact that we're running mono green and we're not running like mono white or something, a color that struggles to get lands on the field, we're gonna have absolutely no problem getting Wilson on the field at any point in time and rebuilding after a board wipe. Some of the cons in this deck is that there's no permanent indestructibility except for Tyrite Sanctum. So everything realistically speaking, as long as it's not your turn, and despite if you have a Nara out, you're not gonna have a permanent fixture, and there's a limited amount of indestructible instant speed interaction with this deck. So if your opponents just hyper focus on Wilson and you have to play around that, most of the time they will, because this is going to be a very fast deck. And the fact that you're only running a couple of, or in this deck itself, it's running only a couple of instant speed cards that give indestructibility. And there's a very small creature count. As I mentioned before, there's only 7 creatures in this deck, excluding Wilson. But for the fact that we also have a couple of cards that also create tokens, it's not too bad. But for the fact that, like, for the most part, we're only using Wilson and not too much else to have as defense, so you might get hit a lot. The most glaring one, I think, is that it's lacking major color support. I think not having white definitely kind of hurts this deck, but in a way, making mono green as a challenge was super beneficial. It was such a great fun test. But that being aside, it does lack white's support. It does lack blue's aura and enchantment support. It's really hard to do mono green auras and equipments. Not impossible, as I just proved to you just now, but it does catch up, especially when you're lacking a lot of the cards that allow you to draw some extra cards. And now we're gonna get into our out of budget recommendations. So as you've seen, we could build this deck for $50, but if you wanna go above and beyond and make this deck that much better, here are just about 4 recommendations I can give you guys. The first of which is Unnatural Growth. So Unnatural Growth, it's under a $10 card, but beginning of each combat, you double the power and toughness of each creature you control. Despite the fact we'll have Raised by Giants and Wilson will be a super pumped bear, we're going to double his power and we're going to be swinging for big, especially the fact that he has Trample, he has War 2, and you'll more than likely have something that'll have Hexproof or Indestructibility to protect him. You're gonna just kill somebody right off the bat with this card. The next of which is gonna be Force of Vigor. So again, another card that'll allow you to destroy artifacts and enchantments, but this one, if it's not your turn, you can actually just exile a green card from your hand rather than paying the cost, and you destroy up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. So think of it as a Return to Dust, but instant speed interaction. You don't have that limitation on your main phase, and you just have to exile a green card from your hand instead of paying the mana cost. The next one is Navimaya, Cradle of Growth, where each land is a force and additional to its other land types. So This will definitely aid us in with our Blanchwood armor, and this will give us, if we have ways to get Forest Walk and other ways of it. This is just a super good card, and especially so, you can add this to your deck. I feel like any green deck would definitely love to have this. And it's like I mentioned before, the Blanchwood armor would definitely benefit off Yavimaya Cradle of Growth. And the last of which is going to be Commander's Plate. So with this, equipped creature will get +3/+3 and has protection from each color that's not in your commander's color identity. Bear that last part in mind. Protection from each color that's not in your commander's color identity. We're only running one color, so each other color is basically not going to be able to interact with Wilson as long as the Commander's Plate is equipped to him. So basically, a little boost and a lot of protection on top of him. And we'll leave it off here today, guys. What do you guys think of today's brew? Do you like this Wilson build, or do you have any suggestions for future brews? Let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget, if you like this kind of channel and you like this kind of content, please consider liking the video, share it amongst your play group, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon, because not only would I appreciate it, but this will actually allow the channel to grow a lot more and be able to get more friends on the eyes of new content like this. And yeah, if you want to follow me on my socials, they'll be in the bottom left-hand side of your screen. You're going to see my Facebook, my Instagram, and my Twitter. That's how you're going to be able to reach out to me if you have any suggestions for any future brews, any future deck video ideas, anything like that. Feel free to give me a shout out on any one of those social medias, and we'll be able to work something out from there. Last thing before I let you go today is that I post about 2 to 3 videos a month. That's about a bi-weekly ratio. This is just a temporary thing until I get back to my regular schedule. I just have a couple of errands that I need to finish up, and then I'll be back to weekly posting. But with that, I like to thank you all for watching this video. Truly appreciate it. If you made it up this far and you made it to the end of the video, my God, you guys are committed. But until then, stay safe, and I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. And until then, cheers, everybody.